Can Brock Nelson finally be the answer for the Colorado Avalanche at their much coveted second line center position? And what other moves potentially should the Colorado Avalanche make as they prepare for the upcoming 2025 season? We also got some news about potential changes to the NBA All-Star game from a friend of ours in the morning, and we will get into all of that on today's rundown as we welcome in another friend of the show, Mike Evans, co-host of Stokely and Evans with Mark Schlereth every morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, Richie. How are you?
Doing good. Well, Mike, I want to start off the show today as I'm speaking to a certified credentialed hockey guy. I want to get into a little bit of hockey talk as we got a pretty decent announcement from the Colorado Avalanche this morning that they have chosen to extend Brock Nelson on a 3-year, $22.5 million deal worth about $7.5 million annually, which is about what the market was going to predict for a guy like Brock Nelson. And it wipes away the rumors that we'd heard, the credible rumors from credible insiders that Brock maybe has eyes on a homecoming, returning to Minnesota, or tempting the waters in free agency. But he does not. The Avalanche locked down the second line center that they picked up at the deadline of last season and was a part of the many dominoes that fell after the Mikko Rantanen trade. What was your initial emotion when you saw that Brock Nelson is going to be the second line center for at least the next year or two here in Colorado?
Yeah, I was happy to hear the news. I was honestly relieved to hear the news because it's an important position that we've talked about many times, that the Avalanche have struggled to find a reliable second line center since Nazem Kadri left. And I know that some folks are getting tired of hearing about Naz, but the fact is that it's a very important position that the Avalanche have swung and missed with over the last couple of years. Nelson, when you heard the reports about him possibly wanting to leave, I was like, man, that would sting, because you gave up a lot to get him. You gave up a first-round pick. You gave up your top prospect in Cal Ritchie, and for what might have turned out to be a rental. And then in order to go out and replace him, you were talking about guys like Sam Bennett from Florida, where you'd be looking at a lot more years for more money to bring him in. So to be able to now bring back Brock Nelson at a good number, a solid number, and really feel like not only you're getting a good player at a very important position, but you can also feel good about what you gave up to get him.
And that's assuming that the guys that they would be looking at if they didn't re-sign Nelson wouldn't be retained by their other team or have a better offer. Because once you get into that free agency pool and you need somebody, you've got to walk away with somebody, and you just don't know who it's going to be. So I agree with you. I think this is a comfortable and a good move overall for the Colorado Avalanche. And yes, you could point to at times for a lot of players on the roster, given how their postseason ended in abrupt fashion, who maybe you wanted to see more from, you expected more from. But with the 9 transactions that took place over the course of last season leading up to the deadline and all the moving parts that came together, I really don't hate the concept of coming into a season where they're already going to have their fair share of questions. That second line center, to your point, is once again not the top of that list.
Yeah, he still has to go out and do it. Remember, a year ago at this time, they had traded for Casey Middlestat. They had signed Casey Middlestat to a new contract, and we were sitting here going, okay, they're set at 2C with Casey Middlestat, and then we know how that worked out. So the Nelson move should work out. This is a really good player with a proven track record. So at least for the next couple of years, I mean, he is going to be 34 in October. That's not something you can just blow off. But at least for the first couple of years of this deal, it should be a good deal for the Avs.
Well, in the eyes of the organization, they definitely agree with you. Chris McFarland, when he released a statement earlier today about the transaction, said, quote, "We're thrilled to have reached an agreement with Brock to keep him in Colorado for the next 3 seasons. He's been a great center in this league for a long time, and he brings professionalism and dedicated work ethic on and off the ice. We think he's a great fit and a stabilizing presence to our second line center role with his size and ability to touch all areas of the ice. And we're excited to see what contributions will be over a larger sample size with the Avalanche." So, Mike, when it comes to your top 6 now for the Colorado Avalanche, with what we saw at the end of last season and heading into this season, where is your level of confidence at with the ability for this top six to perform at a Stanley Cup championship contending level going forward?
It's high. It really is. And, last year's team, the moves that they made look good on paper. They were supposed to work, right? They didn't. So, that's on this group of players. But when you look at what they're in position to bring back, nothing's changed, Richie. I mean, it's still on paper a loaded team. It's still on paper a team that should go out and once again be a heavy favorite to win the Stanley Cup next year. It's just a matter of them doing it. But it should be a very good hockey team. You look at what Jared Bednar said about this team after they made all the trades. He said, I love how we're positioned down the middle. All four lines at center. We're big, we're long, we're tough to play against. And so when you look at a center depth that has McKinnon, Nelson, Coyle, Drury, I mean, honestly, that's, there are a lot of NHL teams that are going to be salivating, man, with envy that the Avs have the kind of depth that they have down the middle. And you have Gabe Landeskog now for a full year. Maybe some of the worry or uncertainty surrounding Val Nichushkin has dwindled a little bit in that he was able to go out and be a pro for a full year. So when you put it all together, it's basically going to be the same team that fell in the first round this past year. But I think we all understand that this is a team that is more than capable of making a serious run to the Stanley Cup.
Well, the roster now with second line center being off the table in terms of question marks, the roster now by and large is pretty complete. They're still about $1.2 million under the cap, and they're likely going to have a parting of the ways or a tough decision to make with a guy like Jonathan Drouin, who's going to be looking at about $5 million a year. So let's just say, Mike, that you, Mike Evans, are in the war room with Chris McFarland. What, if anything, in terms of remaining moves that could or should be made, should Colorado consider with the offseason right around the corner?
You could bring everybody back. They definitely have the way the cap is set up that they could bring everybody back. I wouldn't mind a little bit of tweaking to this roster. I wouldn't mind being able to have some flexibility to go out and maybe make a different addition here and there, especially when it comes to defense. So I think if you look at guys like Miles Wood, guys like Ross Colton, I think if you can find a way to be able to move them, I think that would be smart just to be able to give yourself some kind of flexibility. I think there's also some other players that might be on that list, guys like a Josh Manson, guys like Sammy Girard is a possibility, but we're not talking about major moves here. We're talking about a roster that is built to win right now. And so you don't have to do much in the way of roster construction other than a tweak here or there. You're right about Drouin. There's just no way that you're going to be able to bring him back. I mean, if I'm seeing numbers, I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, like 3 years, $15 million for Jonathan Drouin. Hey, thanks. Sorry. See ya. But all in all, this is a team that is set to run it back and should be right in the mix. I will say, I would hope that I think that the focus going into the regular season now has to be different. I think this team has no longer got the grace to be able to say, all right, finish wherever you finish in the standings. And, you guys as a Stanley Cup champion have proven that you can come from anywhere in the playoffs and win. I think after what's happened the last couple of years, finishing third in the division both times, I think there has to be that urgency right from the start of the season. Let's eliminate a lot of this doubt, okay? Go out, win the division, maybe put yourself in a position not only to win the division, but to have the number one seed in the Western Conference. I think that with everybody coming back and all the roles well-defined, that there's no reason why this is a team that can't go out and have the best record in the West and have home ice throughout the course of the entire playoffs rather than, having what we've seen the last couple of years coming out of that third seed in the division.
I couldn't agree with you more on the concept of seeding, and I think there's been a pretty significant mindset around both the Colorado Avalanche and the Nuggets, frankly, that says, when we've got Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, and Valeri Nichushkin and that core just get to the playoffs and let the dice fall. Well, we saw how that's panned out a couple of times, and you draw a tough first-round matchup with the Dallas Stars, who would have been tough with or without Mikko Rantanen, frankly, because of the stylistic way that they match up. And we see that with the Nuggets. So if you've got Nikola Jokic, it doesn't matter. And I struggle with that because I think the margin for error for both of these teams is pretty slim, and the rest of the conference around each of those teams has gotten a lot better, frankly, in a lot of ways. So I agree with that. Before we turn the page on the Brock Nelson thing, I want to bring up Brock Nelson's statement that was part of what the Colorado Avalanche released today about re-signing in Colorado. As a part of that statement, he said, quote, "My family and I are excited to be staying in Colorado. Having spent my entire career with one organization, we weren't totally sure what to expect when we arrived in Denver. But getting the opportunity to play for the Avalanche, to compete with a great group of teammates in that locker room and in front of the tremendous fans at Ball Arena, we knew this was where we wanted to stay." And I bring that up, Mike, because it's very contradictory to some reports that we heard about another member, another new face on the Colorado Avalanche, and that is Marty Necas, who was obviously the centerpiece of the Mikko Rantanen trade in the Hall that came back from Carolina, along with Jack Drury and the draft picks and the like. And there were some reports coming out of Sportsnet and other organizations that Marty Necas maybe wasn't necessarily thrilled with how his back half of a season and postseason went in Colorado. Now, these are just rumors and reports and things like that, and this isn't necessarily coming directly from the mouth of Necas, at least at this point. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that these words are true and that Marty Necas maybe wasn't thrilled with how things went in Colorado. Comparing and contrasting what we've heard from Brock Nelson and what we heard from Marty Necas, what did you make of those reports that came out and what it could mean for the Avalanche going forward if there is a potential rift forming with a guy like that?
Well, let me get that out of the way. Just what you said. Well, I don't know. I don't know how legit these reports are, but let's say they are. Okay, we're having a conversation here. Let's say they are. Well, Marty, come on, man. I mean, whose fault is that? If you weren't comfortable here, why? I mean, you had a chance to play with Nathan McKinnon. You were on the number one power play. Everything was set up for you to shine. And for most of the time during the regular season, he did. He, like a lot of the players in the playoffs, just didn't play up to their capabilities. But what possibly could be used in your mind that it was a rough situation for you? Okay, maybe he caught some criticism in the playoffs. I mean, I know that the Avs weren't happy with the way he was playing, especially defensively. Okay. Maybe he caught a little grief about that, but is that different from any of the kind of maybe criticism that he heard during his time with Carolina? I mean, I'm sure that, whatever complaints, whatever criticism the Avalanche may have had with Marty Necas during the playoffs, I'm sure Carolina coaches probably expressed some of that same frustration. So if he's unhappy here, well, then that would be, in my opinion, I think that's more on Marty Necas than it is on how the Avalanche are conducting business.
100%. My initial thought was, listen, whether he wanted to leave Carolina or not, a player doesn't always get to choose his future and his path in professional sports. But I think it goes without saying that you could have ended up in a lot worse places than an organization with legitimate championship contention potential, alongside arguably one of, if not the greatest center in hockey right now in Nathan McKinnon, on the top power play line, and frankly, with the backing from said organization with Stanley Cup pedigree, who said, listen, we are going to carve off one of our biggest, most successful stories in franchise history in Mikko Rantanen, and we are going to send him away to rebuild with you as the centerpiece of that. If all of that was not green enough in the eyes, of Marty Necas, then buddy, you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Go play in San Jose for a little bit, and you tell me if you miss playing with Nathan McKinnon and Arturi Lehkonen and Kale and Val and all of that. So I don't know what the truth is behind that, or how much validity there is to that, if that came from Marty Necas, because you don't really know those things until it's confirmed by the person or the team or whatever. But if there is something forming there, and let's say, Marty Necas, after his last year under contract here this season, were to depart from the Avalanche, I told Will Peterson yesterday, and you're in a similar camp, that definitely would put a little extra sting on the Chris McFarland trade decision, because the main depth piece that you would have traded Mikko Rantanen for initially, and Brock Nelson is a part of that because all the corresponding moves came, with that. But that would definitely hurt the hindsight look back at the Mikko Rantanen trade, regardless of how you felt about it at the onset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to me, it's very clear because, whatever the Avalanche, they have a reputation of doing things the right way, and they have for a long time. So to me, if you're unhappy with your role, that's on you. And if this is legit, then they got to move them. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is coming, especially juxtapose that with the comments that Brock Nelson and other players have made about how special it is to play for this organization, how they do things the right way. If this guy doesn't want to be here, get him out. Because you're right, especially with the looming contract situation after this year, you're in a position where you're going to have to either make a commitment to this guy, or you're just going to have to move off of him. It's kind of like, going down that Mikko road again. If you don't think you're going to work out a deal, or you don't necessarily want to work out a deal with him, then you got to move him. You got to try to get as much as you can in return.
And something tells me if Chris McFarland is a learning man and an observant man, which I think that he is, maybe to appease the pitchforks and lanterns mob that came out after the Mikko Rantanen trade, if he does decide to move Marty Necas, maybe he just doesn't do it 6 weeks before the deadline, and maybe it's closer to the week of, or not enough time for Necas to then end up in Dallas alongside Mikko once again. Shifting gears here a little bit, Mike, to the NBA. Mm-hmm. And you, as I mentioned at the start of the show, you have been the co-host of our morning show here on Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan for the better part of the last decade, alongside Mark Schlereth and now Brandon Stokely. And I would bet if I asked Mark Schlereth who he has felt most honored to sit next to in his muckety-muck type of life, where he bumps shoulders with a lot of people, he would probably say you. But a close second might be NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, whom Mark found himself basically sitting next to on the set of his television show Breakfast Ball on FS1 this morning. And we got a little news from the in-person interview with Adam Silver about the upcoming NBA All-Star Weekend. When asked about the potential for a Team USA versus the World format, Silver said, "I'm not exactly sure what the format will be yet. I paid a lot of attention to what the NHL did, which was a huge success." Obviously referencing the Four Nations face-off that the NHL put off, which was, from a viewership standpoint and just an eyeball entertainment standpoint, a massive success in this person's opinion. But he did basically say that given the fact that the NBA All-Star Game is going to be on NBC, who is also carrying the Olympics, the All-Star Game day is going to be during a day of Olympic coverage, that they are going to look at this Team USA versus the World format as a potential tweak for this year. What was your initial reaction to the beautiful question work and answer that we got from Craig Carton and Mark Schlereth to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver?
I love it. It's something that we talked about. It was my solution as soon as we saw another one of those just awful All-Star games this year. To me, the only possible answer is a USA versus the World game. And even then, Richie, in just an All-Star surrounding, it would not carry the same kind of sizzle that the Four Nations face-off carried. I think that was kind of on its own. But it would help. It would help because what they're trying to trot out right now just stinks. And I do think that if you did have a USA versus the world, I think it would be fantastic, but I don't think it would be the result that a lot of American basketball fans would like, because the European to the world team would absolutely go into that game serious, intent, focused, and definitely trying to win. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure that the U.S. team would be good enough. And B, I'm not sure if they'd be able to match that kind of intensity. I don't think it would end well for Team USA in that format, but it would be, at least it would be fun to watch. And I think it would certainly give the NBA All-Star game a much needed boost.
Well, what gave so much excitement in the last Summer Olympics in the basketball world was the fact that you had, the LeBron called them the Avengers, which whatever, but you had the Avengers in Team USA against Team Serbia first, with Nikola Jokic and the band of non-professional level basketball players outside of Bogdanovic, taking them down to the wire, to the minute, and then Team France and all of that, and the drama that would be there. And I think, to your point about the Four Nations face-off, that this format, because it's not as serious, it's not taken as seriously in the NBA as these guys take that nationalistic pride in the NHL. But also, it's not just a singular nation, it's the world. So they're basically just banding together against the United States, which is fun. But the age thing would definitely be a significant difference. When you look at Team USA, you're looking at LeBron, KD, Steph, guys that are kind of longer in the tooth and on the back nine, or really the back 3 or 4 in some cases of their careers. Whereas with the world team, if you're talking about Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Victor Wembanyama, the combination of length, shooting ability, passing ability, it really does set up a situation that I would, for the record, be totally in favor for, as someone who wasn't going to be that upset if Team Serbia had beaten Team USA in the actual Olympics. I would be totally in favor of this, and I agree with you. I think this would be a lot more difficult for Team USA than it might seem just in this early onset.
Oh, I think if you were putting out an early line, odds maker line, I think the world would be a solid 7.5, 8.5.
That was exactly 7.5 was exactly the number I was going to say.
I think it would be that way, and this is part of a larger discussion, but it might not be the worst thing if in that kind of a format we got our butts kicked, because with the growth of AAU basketball and travel basketball and things like that, I just don't know if, and with college basketball the way it is, and NIL and transfer portals, I don't know if we're putting out and developing the best basketball players possible. And you look at the European model. The world is catching up fast, and the way that they go about and the way they seem to play for each other, not as individualistic as maybe young basketball players coming up through the ranks are accustomed to with the high school and AAU and college mentality that's out there, might not be the worst thing to kind of have a bit of a wake-up call at the hands of the rest of the world. Yeah,
when you're looking at, and my eyes were open to this thanks to Mike Singer, actually, who wrote Why So Serious, the story on the rise of Nikola Jokic and chronicling the title year for the Nuggets. If you haven't read it, any of you out there, it's a fantastic book. But it really just opened the eyes as Mike peeled back really how Nikola Jokic came to be a member of the NBA, or specifically the Denver Nuggets. And there is no United States parallel or equivalent, because it's just a different world, literally, that these international players live in, to where they are basically born and set up from, youth and adolescence to be on a specific track, to the degree where they find themselves at 13, 14 years old, moving to an entirely different country by themselves to play semi-professional or professional basketball overseas in a way that just doesn't translate to America. When I was 13 years old, I was picking my nose, reading comic books, and trying to flirt with girls. And Nikola Jokic was moving into a flat in another country to try to play basketball at Mega or these other big Eastern European leagues. And and you see it more with there's that kid at BYU from Russia that's doing it. Luka Doncic followed a similar path in that regard. It's such a built different kind of moment when you contrast these two styles. And while you might not say that Team USA or kids today don't need to replicate that significant of a model, it does just go to show you that how much it means to these other guys, and that getting by on just sheer talent alone, like the United States has done through specialization, sometimes isn't always enough. Speaking of, go ahead.
Also, Richie, there's the two models are different with the world players. I think there's more. There's a lot more practice involved with these teams. It's not like the AAU mentality where it's just play game after game after game after game. And there's much more of an emphasis on all around skill development. And that's why you look and you see your Nikola Jokic's and you see Luka Doncic, you see Victor Wembanyama, you see these, huge basketball, players that are 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet and taller, and they're multi-dimensional. They're multi-skilled. And that's how a lot of the European players are brought up. And probably more, quite frankly, than our guys are brought up. So it'll be fascinating. I hope it happens. I don't think it'll be at the same level of a Four Nations face-off type thing, but at least it will give a much needed lift to an all-star weekend that's just dying on the vine. And it'll be good too, because these American players will understand. The world will be coming to not only beat them, but embarrass them. And so they better be ready for it.
Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, on the level of Olympic kind of competition or the Four Nations face-off, even as a parallel, because the floor is so low for the NBA All-Star Game specifically that it just has to hop over it. It doesn't have to leap, in my opinion, to be a step or a building block in the right direction. And speaking of a low floor, on the way out here, I want to make sure that I mention the Colorado Rockies, who for the first time in 23 consecutive series have found a way to win, as they clinched it last night. And going into the airing of this show, they were winning in Miami for a potential sweep of a series. They break a streak that set an MLB record for most consecutive series losses dating back to last season. Mike, was it almost kind of conflicting seeing and reading that news that the Rockies, who have just been so magically falling into like unknown depths of poor play and mismanagement, actually managed to do something good, even if it was just for a flicker?
Yeah, we talked about this morning, and it was like the Rockies won a baseball game and in the process became a lot less interesting. I mean, let's face it. What's happening with this team this year is so historic, so historically bad that it's been actually compelling and interesting. I mean, this isn't just slogging through a mediocre season. This is being bad, and so it's been fascinating to watch. Like, how bad can it go? How bad can it be? And so this streak of the series was something that was becoming really, must-see TV. And, the fact that they've ended the streak now, it's almost kind of anticlimactic now. I mean, they're still a bad baseball team, and they're still on a historically bad pace, but will it be as captivating as it was when they had that series streak going on? So, no, all of a sudden, by winning a couple of games, the Rockies are less interesting. Go figure.
Yeah, I think that we got to witness the aftermath of what I would assume to be an entire rooms full of producers and researchers and statisticians for all these national networks who are having to absolutely scramble and cram to be able to provide the Pat McAfee's, the first takes, the Colin Cowherds, all these national talking heads who I can almost promise you couldn't have named a single fact or player about the Colorado Rockies before this season. I have heard more national coverage of the Colorado Rockies than when they were a postseason contending team at the end of the 2010s. It's been unbelievable, and there is a sick part of me, maybe a controversial part of me, that kind of hopes that it continues. One, because I just there is something about marveling at history. I felt the same way when Mike McDaniel chose not to kick a field goal against the Broncos to go up, and break a record for the biggest point differential or whatever it was, because it was the classy thing to do or whatever. I was in favor of it. The difference of them losing by 50 or 53 didn't matter to me. And I kind of feel that way about this Colorado Rockies team. My gut tells me with a series coming up against the Mets that their losing ways are going to continue, at least for the immediate future. But ultimately, the question I think that we are still going to be pondering as they transverse the rest of this season is how much, if anything, will a historically bad season in America's oldest and most cherished sport do to change the potential trajectory of the future for this franchise? Because I'm going to be honest with you, Mike, I don't think it will change the trajectory of it, even if they become the sole owner of the worst season in the history of baseball.
Richie, I'm with you. I really deep down in my gut feel the same way. But if there's any chance of Dick Monfort, hello Dick, wake up, come out of your coma and come out of this self-induced paralysis that surrounds the way he runs this team, you got to root for it to be as historically bad as possible. You got to root for it to be so bad and for the fans to stay away and for the national coverage to really shine a spotlight on just how embarrassing it is. And I know when we talk about this stuff and we're saying winning is bad, I know it sounds mean. I know it does. And I'm not. This has nothing to do with the players. Absolutely nothing. Okay. You unfortunately are casualties in this. The problem is that this is something bigger than you as players. And it's about the way that Dick Monfort runs this team and his just absolute refusal to just shake things up. And I think that's all any of us are asking is just try something different. Try a different model rather than the same old, same old. And the other thing too is, you know how far it would go if Dick Monfort would just come out and just say, I'm sorry to all of you Rocky fans who supported us over the years. I am sorry it's gotten to this point. I am embarrassed. I'm humiliated. I'm disgusted that it has gotten to this point under my watch, and I am vowing to make it better. He doesn't do that. No. All it is it's gonna, hey, stick with us. It'll get better. Hey, we see some positive signs. Hey, if we just stay with it, we'll have a better outcome down the road. Stop it. Just come out, admit that what is going on right now is a train wreck. Admit that it's on your watch, and admit that you're willing to come out and try to do some different things. But until we actually see signs that he's willing to do things differently, Richie, it sounds really callous, but unless this team is historically bad, they could lose 100 games and draw 3 million people, and it'll be a successful season for Dick Monfort. The only way that this can possibly work is if it gets so bad, lose 120, 125, 130 games, and have it actually be reflected with the amount of fans showing up to the games, then maybe, and I'm with you, I'm still skeptical about whether or not that would really change things.
Yeah, it was an amazing statistic for me to see about the Rockies that they're in game one of the series against the Marlins, the reported attendance was like just a shade over 5,000. And I know you guys talked about this morning at the second game, the reported attendance was similar, but the actual in-person attendance might have been like a couple hundred people. But even if you just took it at the reported attendance based on ticket sales, which was just over 5,000, it was like 5,100. The combined attendance of like the Marlins previous like 3 or 4 games was 31,000 total fans. And the Rockies, in the middle of the worst start in the history of baseball, dating back to essentially the Civil War in the United States of America, have averaged more than 31,000 fans at 25% of their home games so far this season, almost all of which were losses. So they are a spectacle of spectacle. They are the bearded lady. They are the accident on the side of the highway. They are the thing that you just can't, even though it's bizarre and it's weird, you can't necessarily take both eyes off of it. And we will see how the rest of this season pans out. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll catch you first thing tomorrow morning, reacting to another day of Broncos OTAs. I'm sure we'll have more news as it relates to the NBA, maybe a step closer to the general manager search, and everything that you, Stoke, and Mark will have in store for us. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Richie.
Appreciate it. To the rest of you out there, have a wonderful rest of your hump day. It is just one day closer to another. We're going to hear from Sean Payton tomorrow out at Broncos OTAs as this team kind of continues to take shape and seeing the initial impact that these rookies and these free agents may have on a team that it seems pretty wide open in terms of what they may be able to do as a regular season contender for the AFC West, as a postseason contender for the wild card round and beyond. And like I said to Mike, maybe we'll get some more answers over at Ball Arena about who's going to help David Adelman call the shots in this new era of Nuggets basketball. One thing is for sure, we will have it all locked in for you on Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan, at DenverSports.com, and on shows like The Rundown, the Mile High Hoops and Hockey Podcast, Denver Sports Daily, and everything across all of our social media channels. We'll catch you then.